Today, we are delighted to welcome Kate Scott to present our Success Series webinar, 5-Step Strategy to Successfully Engage and Communicate with Your Audience. So, Kate is currently Head of Digital Marketing for IBM Australia and New Zealand, and she has a keen interest in technology, new media, user experience design, and effective communication strategies. You can follow Kate on Twitter at Kezabeth, as you can see on the screen, and you can also contact her by email at kate_scott_au@yahoo.com. Today, Kate will share with us the key steps we should all consider to make sure we develop a successful communication strategy. Basically, all the elements that we need to think about before starting the communication process and going out to the market. More specifically, she will cover how to deliver on expectations, how to factor in context, how to create conversation effectively, and measure the performance.
Thank you. Great. So, looking at the 5 steps or the 5 elements in communicating with customers and being effective about it, one of the things I think is important to think through up front and keep in mind with this type of area is that these steps are all important and so in certain ways are sequential, but it's not a good idea to think of them as a flight of stairs. So I do this step, then I leave that step and go to this step, and then I go to the next step, and then when I get to the top I stop. These are actually very much steps that blend into each other, that work across each other and never actually stop. Think of this, rather than a staircase, as kind of a never-ending upward spiral. You start at a certain level, and if you keep doing this, keep thinking about this correctly, keep making an effort on every element, it will continue to improve. So, looking at the various areas and starting with the one at the bottom of the screen, because it underpins all the others. Hygiene basically means getting the basics right. If you don't have those right, if you can't deliver your product, if your product doesn't deliver on what you're promising, all the marketing brilliance in the world isn't going to save you. There's actually a great story out of Australia here when I was growing up, where there was a brilliant ad for a cat food. Everyone loved it. Sales of the cat food spiked, and I do mean literally spiked. People bought it once and then never bought it again because cats hated it. So, not exactly a long-term success in terms of advertising and communications. So, there's no point starting until you actually can deliver what you're saying you're going to. Then once you get to that, what are you actually putting out there? What content are you actually creating and sending out to get the customer interested in you? How are you actually going to be part of their world as opposed to interrupting it? The quality and relevance of the content is a constant review as well. And then there's context. The simple fact is the best content in the world is not going to work if it's been delivered in the wrong environment. If people are busy doing something else or having a completely different experience or, are in a completely different mindset when that perfect content is delivered, it's no longer perfect. It's irrelevant, it's interruption. So context is a very, very important area. And then off the back of that is conversation. It's no longer a one-way broadcast. The brand must actually be able to engage in a conversation with its customers, prospective customers, whoever, but also needs to accept the fact that there's going to be conversations happening about the brand, about the product, that they potentially have no place in, which can be pretty scary for people. And then moving up through all of that and watching over the top of it and making sure we can actually go back and improve all of them is measurement. So you need to measure everything you're doing, and that sounds like you're measuring a lot. And I guess that's one of the challenges, because it is these days possible to measure more or less everything you're doing. And it's a case then of actually working out what to focus on in your measures, because too much information is quite often as bad as not enough, because you get confused by it. So looking at hygiene. So, the first thing to do is to meet or exceed expectations, and to do so at all stages. You need to make sure that when people are first being introduced to you, when they're actually doing initial kind of investigation, when they're wanting to talk to someone, when they're dealing with customer service, all of those areas, every single touch point, you need to look at what the expectations are and make sure you meet them. I mean, the tough part is that the minute you exceed expectations, those become the new expectations. And so you're constantly having to game up, game up, game up. So, you need to make sure that you can always step to that next level when you actually demonstrate you can do it. Zappos are a very, very good example of people who constantly exceed expectations, and you can see the amount of effort they put into that. If you go into discussions on their back-end systems, their staff training, their attitudes, everything is focused on basic delivery, but at a level people just cannot believe. Deliver what's expected. If people have ordered a pink widget, don't send them a green one. Unless you actually phone them up beforehand and say, hey, look, it's green. Is that going to be a problem, or it's still going to do the same thing? But manage expectations. And one of the other things I want to point out here, because people I've come across at various points in time have been very proud of delivering early. And while sometimes that is a good thing, sometimes it's not. If you're actually going, right, we're here, we're early, we're ready, let's go, and the people aren't actually ready, then you're going to throw them out, and they're going to feel, like they're unable to do their job properly because they haven't been allowed to prepare to the timeline they were expecting. So, in as much as a late delivery is delaying things, in some cases an early delivery, if it's not properly communicated, can delay things because people don't actually understand, they aren't ready. And admittedly within that, and I'm thinking about meetings as much as anything else here, you need to allow for cultural nuances. I mean, certain parts of the world you have to be on time. Certain parts of the world, if you're on time, you're actually early. And, that's always a thing to be aware of when you're dealing with areas you're potentially not used to. Those unwritten rules and expectations are the ones that are going to trip you up because they are unwritten. And I guess the last point on this is people don't like surprises. It has to be a pretty awesome surprise for people to be straight up happy about it. Even if it is a great one, quite often people would actually rather know about it and look forward to it, be able to anticipate and enjoy that waiting time. So, think those things through in terms of how you can actually delight people by doing what they expect you to do and what they need you to do. So, Caroline, can I get you to flick down again, please? Thanks. And this is why I feel hygiene is so incredibly important. The purchase funnel no longer exists. It is a cycle, and what you tend to find is people have an initial consideration set, which is what everyone always wanted to have. Back in the day of the funnel, you needed to be in people's consideration set. You needed to have awareness, because if you weren't in the consideration set, you never got any further down the funnel. But now, with the amount of information available to people so incredibly easily, when they actually start moving into the second stage of what was called the funnel, all of a sudden all this extra information, these extra options, these new ideas and opportunities suddenly hit their plates. And so trying to actually make sure that you have presence in that second area, that active evaluation area, is actually becoming more and more important, because you need to be there in order to actually move into the moment of purchase, which, you know, as an area, it hasn't changed all that much in terms of that decision. It's simply the amount of choice they have in making that decision, and potentially the information they use to help them make that decision has changed. And then, of course, it's actually moving into, you know, the post-purchase experience, continuing to meet expectations after they've actually purchased the product or the service or made the subscription. And then actually moving back so that when they go to repurchase or to recommendation, it becomes a loyalty loop. And one of the general rules of thumb I've always worked to is that it costs at least 3 times as much to acquire a new customer as to retain an old one. And it's always been a frustration that many, many companies focus so much on acquisition without actually valuing the customers they already have. And if you think about this in terms of the communication you're going to be doing, it's so much easier to actually communicate with people that you already have permission to communicate with. You know, if someone's bought your product, depending on what it is and what the situation is, you already have a certain level of permission to communicate with them directly. You know, you may have their email address. They may have actually opted into one of your newsletters or, you know, kind of updates or anything like that. You already have permission to go into their personal communications as one of their trusted sources. So making sure you can actually make proper use of that as you're moving into the next session is actually being really, really interesting. Moving into content, and I guess the key with the content marketing attitude is exactly around this quote from David Beaton in Marriott, is it's no longer about interrupting people, about, you know, kind of jumping in front of people as they're trying to go about their daily business and going, oi, look at this. But it actually is becoming the information, the interesting story, you know, the useful, helpful advice that people are actually looking for as they're going about their daily business. But one of the things I would like to point out is that it's not new. Content marketing has been around for a very long time. You can see the picture there. That's the first ever Michelin guide, and you can't read it too easily in that screenshot, but it's from 1900, and that's still going strong. You know, you've got advertorials have been in magazines and newspapers for a very long time. Soap operas are called soap operas because when they first appeared on television, they were sponsored by detergent companies, and, you know, have been a very effective way for them to get across to their target market of housewives ever since. You know, housewives themselves have changed considerably over the time, but soap operas still have a very strong appeal. The Michelin Guide, as I mentioned, and the Guinness Book of World Records, yes, is from Guinness the brewer. They sold it off to another group in 2001, but, you know, talk about stronger brand association. It's still very much there, and I think still does a great deal of good in terms of brand interest for the beer. I mean, people actively seek this stuff out. So it's not new. It's just making use of new channels and the strengths and particular characteristics of these new channels is where life gets interesting. So if we can go to the next slide, please. God, you can spend forever talking about content marketing, but these 4 websites will do a far better job of it than me. HubSpot's blog, Contently's blog, the Content Marketing Institute, and Marketing Profs all do an extremely good job of looking through and compiling extremely good, both curated and original content on content marketing. And I would suggest, yeah, if you really want to dig into it, those are probably 4 very, very good resources. If we look at the next slide, it's just a couple of quotes I thought gave an interesting angle on content marketing, because we do tend to kind of go, right, here's, you know, this article, this infographic, this blog, and they leave it at that. But these 2 actually bring out extra elements that I think are actually very, very important. The first one, which is from the IBM Think Marketing Forum, is talking about how to or it's very, very important to get the audience involved. It's not enough for simply sitting there and passively absorbing information. It's getting them engaged in actually doing something, whether it's sharing it, whether it's querying it, whether it's adding to it. All those kinds of things mean people tie much more closely to both the story and the storyteller and the brand behind it. And the next one I think was a very good point, because when you're looking at the content, you want to make sure it tells a story to the reader, but then you also want to make sure that the content marketing activity tells a good story back to the brand. And that's, obviously where the measurement side of things comes in, but you need to make sure that two-way conversation we're having, or multiple-way conversation we're having, isn't just in terms of, discussions about the brand in the marketplace. It's about what we can do as the storytellers to make the stories better based on what we're getting back. If we move to the next slide, this is actually a very interesting little kind of tip I picked up a while ago. The editor-in-chief of Quartz online newsroom was giving a presentation, and he said they found this to be a true indication of readership of articles by length. So essentially, people read very, very short articles or very, very long articles. And those that are around in the middle, around the 700-word length, very, very low engagement rate. Now, the challenge here is that article length is actually pretty much the length of a standard newspaper article. So what you want to make sure of is that when you are creating content for your channels, you're creating for the right channels. You don't just sit there and go, right, oh yeah, that's an article we put into the newspaper, we're just going to smack that online and everyone's going to love it. You need to make sure you're tailoring for the way people actually absorb in that particular context. Which brings me on to context. We can move to the next slide. So yeah, content performs at its best when relevance and timeliness come together. Or as someone else put it, and I love this, context is, so it might be content is king, but context is queen and she wears the pants. It's very much where the current buzzword of behavioural comes in, and you need to look at where people are, what they're thinking about, what they're caring about, and how they're actually going about their day-to-day business. It's this kind of massive omniscience, and frankly, it's an incredibly difficult thing to do really, really well. Now, I would actually divide context into two general buckets, if we can go to the next slide. The first is what I call macro. So what's happening in the wider environment? Now, I don't know if you guys have seen this. This was actually the part of the promotional activity for the 4th season of House of Cards, which, for those who haven't come across it, is a very popular US TV series based in the White House about a fictional president by the name of Frank Underwood. Now, season 4, which started in March of this year, is actually about his campaign for presidential re-election. So, simply in the way they've actually created the timeline of the actual TV series, they've made a very, very good use of context. But in promoting this series, they did an incredibly good job, because what they did is in December 2015, during the Republican presidential debate, they actually ran an ad for this series that essentially replicated a presidential ad. So, vote for Frank Underwood. And, people were looking at it, and they were obviously seeing this during a presidential debate, during a political TV program, and seeing this in that context, which was both right for the TV series, but also completely unexpected. The amount of buzz and the amount of conversation that was created around it was actually exceptional. So, look at the macro context. What is going on in the wider world that you can maybe make use of, piggyback off, celebrate, amplify, and make yourself more interesting and more relevant to your stakeholders. by showing that you actually are connected with the rest of the world, which, you know, can be slightly different from what companies have done in the past. So if we can move to the next slide, which is more of the micro level of the context. Where are customers in their journey? You know, what are they looking for? Why are they looking for it? One of the things, you know, I've found working for several large companies with very, very strong focus on digital search in particular, is that we analyze to the point where we actually understand what people are actually thinking about or what stage they are in the buyer journey, in Wally's case here, just by the search terms they're using. And so, you know, it might be a very small difference in what they're actually keying in, but it's very important for us to then deliver something very, very different, because they may be in one stage looking at, you know, just general features and benefits of a handset or a mobile phone plan. I have a background in telco. Whereas, you know, typing one word different or in a different order means that they're actually looking to buy. And, you know, one, you're fine actually sending them through to a pretty multicolored product page, but with the other one, if you really want a strong conversion, you get them through to the online shop. Or if they're on their mobile, you get them onto a local, you know, information on where their nearest shop is. And, you know, those types of things are where, you know, being responsive to the customer within their journey becomes incredibly important. Now you can see within that what's incredibly important to doing this well is being able to get hold of good data very, very quickly and being able to actually pull things through from the mountains and fire hoses of data that we deal with and act on it fast in ways we know are going to work. So moving into conversation, and yes, we're skating over the top of these very, very quickly, I'm afraid, but half an hour is actually quite a challenge to dig into something I could very easily spend 10 hours chewing your ears off on. So with conversation, I don't know about you guys, but my mother always told me, you have 2 ears, 1 mouth, please use them in that proportion. And very, very much so when you're actually interacting with customers. Listen first, then respond. And make sure you're responding to what they're actually talking about, what they care about. And enjoy it. You know, if you can get into a good conversation, a good interaction, you can do your brand a great deal of good. You can see I've got a link at the bottom of this, which I would encourage people to look this up if you can. It's actually a customer service Twitter conversation between, I'm just trying to get this all straight, I think it started with Tesco's, moved into, now Tetley's Tea got involved, Jaffa Cakes got involved, frankly, yeah, a whole bunch of the top FMCG brands in the UK ended up having the most hilarious conversation via Twitter about their brands. And actually I think may have been even Tesco Mobile, who actually have a very, very good reputation for extremely funny interactions via Twitter, to the point where people actually go and look for them. And it's been a huge boost to their brand, both in terms of awareness, but also in terms of relevance, particularly for the younger generation, who like that rather irreverent and rather cheeky tone that particular brand has, and puts out via Twitter on a pretty regular basis. So if we can go to the next slide, which is where I actually I think is kind of the basis for this importance of conversation. So if you look at the evolution of communication, I mean, I'm talking through human history here. We have this incredibly strong shared oral culture. I mean, you go right back, you know, to around the campfire, where, you know, you get the people kind of sharing the adventures of the day and how to escape saber-toothed tigers and things. And then you move into kind of the Middle Ages and the travelling bards, and then into the agricultural revolution and, you know, the peddlers and the merchants who bring the news into the marketplaces. And in every case, news and stories are shared, they're discussed, they're a communal event. And then we got the Gutenberg printing press and moved into a more solitary form of absorption of news and information. And you know, this is where kind of the broadcast media came through. And now with the era of the internet, we've moved into what some people are calling this second orality or secondary orality, where we're moving back into this communal form of communication, but rather than being purely oral, it's written as a base, but then also, you know, the video, the infographic, the image that we're seeing on social media as being very, very effective ways of connecting with people. So it's this funny kind of, I guess, twist in our communications history that as our channels are evolving and getting more and more advanced, it's actually allowing us to revert to actually a much older form of communication style. And that's, I think, something that's worth actually kind of sitting in the back of your mind when you're looking at this stuff, and thinking back to how people kind of evolved communication before the Gutenberg printing press sent us into kind of, I guess, solitary confinement when it came to, you know, getting the news. As it really does actually put a completely different spin on how things actually happen. And I really do believe it's something we need to keep an eye on and figure into everything we're doing. So if we can move on to the last section, measurement. You know, thinking about this, who is your audience? What do they care about? And, you know, when you're talking with them, or when other people are talking with them, what's working, what's not, and why? And I guess the thing is, you know, when we're looking at all these incredible metrics you can take, you know, you can look at, you know, views, unique views, engagement rates, dwell times, it just goes on and on and on. What you really need to look at before you actually get into, you know, kind of excited by those numbers that are sitting in front of you and creating pretty graphs, is what actually matters to your business, not even to the communication strategy. What actually is going to turn the dial for your business? Because that is what is going to determine the measures you need to focus on. You know, if I'm looking at Facebook, for example, and then kind of, you know, using that as a communications channel for my customers, oh yeah, I mean, it's great to have a large number of page likes, but if none of those people ever actually come on the page or, you know, follow up on anything beyond that initial like, if they never actually look at your posts, if they never comment, if they never ask questions, if they never share, what use are they to you as a business? You know, in the most basic sense with Facebook, yes, you do need a certain number of, you know, you need that critical mass of followers, but within that you need genuine followers who are engaged with your page and with your brand, because otherwise you're just sitting there talking to empty space. And I rather like this, this final point on this slide, is would you rather be precisely wrong because you found something that was easy to measure, or would you rather be approximately right because you're measuring the right thing but it's difficult to actually get that measure, but at least you can actually see that the needle is moving in the right direction? And the key thing I also think with measurement is hopping back up, and it's kind of why I kind of snuck it into the middle there, is why. So what, now what? You know, web page visits are up 10% this month. Great, why? Are they the right visitors? Is it actual human visitors, or is a bot suddenly deciding that it really wants to hang out on your page a lot? It's a very, very difficult area to deal with. And if we want to move on to the next slide, you'll see there's a lot of people that agree with this. So this was a global survey reported, or I picked it up from Harvard Business Review, that, you know, for executives, the critical success factor for most effective or most important for effective marketing is analytics skills on the marketing team. And backing on that one, I actually got a review from a Sloan Management article where managers were saying that the chief barrier to creating business value from analytics wasn't actually data management or the complex modeling skills, so it wasn't your specialized geeks. It's actually the translation of the analytics into business actions. So, as one person put it, it's developing the middle management skills and interpretation. So it's actually being able to understand what's going on as a marketing person, as opposed to a data specialist, and what you're going to do about it. And that's a really critical area we're all needing to look at, and kind of underlines a brilliant quote from someone I spent a great deal of time kind of reading from the measurement point of view, and that's Avnish Kaushik, who says that of your analytics investment, 10% should go into the tools and technology, and 90% should go into people. Because it's the people in the end that are going to make the difference. They're the ones that are going to understand the people and the business well enough to know what to measure, when to measure, and what to do with the information that's coming out the back of it. So those essentially are the 5 key areas, underpinned by, delivering with the hygiene, overseen by effective measurement, and then the activity in the middle, making sure you're actually having meaningful conversations in the right context with the right topics and information with the customers you're wanting to attract. So it's not easy. It can be a lot of fun, and I really would encourage people to start exploring how they can really actually factor these into what you're doing day to day and actually start getting onto that upward spiral. So that's essentially what I had to cover.